Hey everybody, this is Way to Fail with another Scrolls Ranked replay, where today we have Critical versus Slin. That's right, a 2 versus 1 matchup. Number 2 Critical, number 1 Slin, and if you want to know what it takes to be number 1, you need a rating of 2205, at least as of the date of this replay. So these are two very high quality players. Both will be playing growth decks today, as I'm sure some of you at home are groaning and saying, yeah, of course it's growth. But it's good to see just two high-quality players and how they deal with each other, because these opponents are very familiar with each other. This is actually from a series of 3 replays. I just chose one of the games here. But let's go ahead and get started, as we have Slin getting the opportunity to go first, as Critical gets a hand with some good cards. He gets a Great Wolf and a Mangy Wolf, which is a good combo, Brother of the Wolf, which is a very strong card, Quake, the ever-infamous Quake that we will talk about, I'm sure, plenty throughout this, as there's 2 growth players, and Ancestral Totem, which is very good for buffing. But the only problem is that if Slin can get some stuff out early, especially since he does have the advantage of going first and being proactive, as Critical points out, it's not always game-breaking, but it's definitely nice to be able to set the tempo. Slin's able to get out a Vetter of the Wild, which will help him ramp up, and Critical has nothing in his hand that can actually respond. As you see, Critical sacking the Pother, that's his his Order Splash, and Slin getting a much faster hand. Kinfolk Brave out early, Vetter out early, so he's going to be able to do some cheap idle damage, which could be good down the line, but more importantly, he has the center of the board and can react to whatever Critical puts down eventually. So just damage all around. Slin now with 4 energy, or 4 growth to Critical's 3, as Critical draws 2 Quakes. So that's one way to help alleviate against a fast start. I know there's been plenty of talk about whether Quake is a card that does too much in one go, deals 3 damage to all structures, 2 to all creatures. And you've seen Quake used a lot in higher level play. It's a good comeback card, but I mean, especially against growth, it's very effective with a lot of creatures that have less health. So Critical, if Slin starts to get a critical mass of cards, Crit could actually come back just with some double Quake action right away. So there's a transposition that he's getting rid of. As Critical finally gets to play a creature, it's a Brother of the Wolf, and he plays it on the bottom row so it doesn't immediately get knocked down to 1 health. But Slin with the Sister of the Fox, and with the Fertile Soil as well. And if you notice there, he actually played the Sister before sacking for growth. That's just a good best practice, because you want to get your card out that will draw a card if you're intending on Fertile Soiling anyway. That way you have a better pick of what cards you want to choose. So early Fertile Soil, early creatures, definitely a better game for Slin so far, but you have to kill 3 idols to win, so there's still plenty of time left, as Critical ditches the rallying and puts down the Great Wolf. So he's essentially trying to split the board for Slin, making him choose, do I want to try and pressure the Brother of the Wolf? Do I want to try and pressure the Great Wolf? And it is entirely possible that Slin, or at least I'd be concerned if I were in Slin's seat, that Critical's sitting on a Mangy Wolf that'll wreak havoc on his forces. So Slin moves up the Vader. Actually, Slin moves up and puts the Transposition out. So that's a great move there. For those of you unfamiliar, Transposition will let you move units, but if your unit hasn't moved, it gets to. So that's one way to sneak the Great Wolf up. And there's a Ragged Wolf as well, so Critical's Great Wolf is dead just by a sweet transposition move by Slin. It's a very good card to splash. Order has some great 1-drops that you can put in there. So Critical giving props to his opponent, saying, you're too good. And there is banter between these 2 players, but it's all friendly, as there's your first Quake. Definitely to be expected. And Critical can follow up with the second Quake and try and knock this guy down to 1, but to be honest, that may be a good move. Depending on what Critical gets in his hand, it may not, because Quake is a good board clearing. But the board's pretty much clear here. It's easier to deal with 1 Great Wolf, or actually, and there we go by Slin. So Slin preemptively getting rid of the threat of the double Quake, well, by going ahead and getting rid of his Great Wolf on his own terms. So there's one solution. If you think your opponent has 2 Quakes, just clear your board too. Make him be the one to replace his creatures first. Notice that Slin has 6 cards now. He has a huge card advantage. And Critical doesn't have a lot to play with other than a Quake and a Mangy Wolf, which is not too awesome by itself. So he ditches the Mangy, and he plays the Jarl. That's the loneliest Jarl. Poor guy, just in the middle. And Slin, what does he respond with? The Kinfolk Veteran. That's where the card advantage really helps. Being able to play 2 Fertile Soils this early in the game is giving Slin a lot of momentum. But Critical here, Quake's not going to do a lot of good, but sacking it for a Burial Ground and a Ranger's Bane. He could play all these cards. He could sit on the Ragged Wolf, just to see if there's something good to react to. But fortunately, this Druid Burial Ground will heal the Jarl over time, assuming it survives. So 2 damage to the veteran. It's going to be a sad day for it pretty soon, but it's done its job. It's done some damage. But Critical asking for please no Pother or Quake, which is true because that would expose our poor Jarl. But Slin playing the Eye of the Eagle just to get her creature out, and what creature is it going to be? A Brother of the Wolf, so there's a good, strong frontline unit, and a Vader as well. And on top of that, a transposition. You may ask, well, why is he switching the positions of those 2 cards? Mainly for card draw, but also just in case Critical decides to play some kind of rallying play. Or not even rallying play, but decides to buff the Jarl in some way, shape, or form. So just trying to protect his Vetter and a card draw on top of that. So Critical getting a Crimson Bull there. And actually, looks like he also drew Ranger's Bane and Sister of the Fox. I'm not sure why the replay jumped there. But notice he didn't have to Crimson Bull the Jarl, because he did enough damage to actually break through the Brother, and both of Slin's units are going to die next turn. So right there, notice Critical not even needing the double Quake there, as now he's the one that has the board advantage, at least with creatures on the board. But Slin's got a lot of cards to play with. As Critical says, please don't triple Quake, please don't triple Quake, and there's the Quake from Slin. Like I said, it's 2 growth players. It's going to be a Quake fest back and forth to a certain extent. And right now, the Druid Burial Ground and Jarl both down to 2 health, as that was a smart Pother by Slin if he knew the Quake was coming, which I'm sure he did. Unfortunately, we cannot see his hand in this replay. But that does move the Jarl away from the Druid Burial Ground, so he doesn't get to heal. So Critical could Quake right back. He does decide to hold on to it, and he gets some cards. He gets a Kinfolk Brave and a Vetter of the Wild, but once again, here's Critical doing what Slin did earlier. He's not giving Slin the incentive to triple Quake. There's no great reason to play creatures on the board when Slin doesn't have anything on the board, when the Vetter and the Kinfolk would just die from Quake. I've seen so many players just say, okay, I got Quaked, let me put everything on the board so I can get a momentum to recover. But Critical and Slin both showing that sometimes the best way to beat your Quake-happy opponent is just to be cautious and let them be the first one to take baby steps. So Critical's working his way back up, trying to get some cards back in his hand. He holds on to the Quake that he may need or may not need. So there's Slin showing, okay, I'm going to put a Brother of the Wolf down. Let's start getting our cards back up. And a key heal for the Jarl as well, as now Critical has a lot of cards he can work with. He's got 2 Braves, he's got a Ragged Wolf, but he elects once again to put the Jarl down because he's still cautious about the fact that these are all tiny units that would just die to 1 Quake. And 2 Jarls can be pretty devastating just by themselves. So quick Pother, and there's your Kinfolk Veteran. That's what Critical, I'm sure, is worried about earlier. Kinfolk Veteran, a very strong unit. I forget who was giving some recent commentary about it, but I'd say it's spot on, where it's not only a hasted unit that does 3 direct damage to a creature or structure, but then you get a 3/4 creature out on top of it, so maybe best bang for your buck for 5 growth out there. I'd agree with other people's assessments there. But we have 1 Jarl, and now actually Critical can play all of his Braves if he wants to. Well, not this turn, but he has 3 Braves. He has a God Hand in his pocket as well, and God Hand with 2 Relentless units can definitely clean up Slin's board pretty hard. But Slin going ahead and putting out a small wolf instead. And is he gonna... There we go, God Hand from Slin. So just when it looks like Critical's gonna be able to get something going here, he loses a Jarl, he just has a Great Wolf and a Brave out. And his God Hand's not happening right now. So he could Fertile Soil, but he elects to get rid of it because this isn't that he has plenty of cards to play. He doesn't need to cycle to get more cards. He just elects to put stuff on the board, try and do as much damage as he can. Takes out the Brother of the Wolf, which is important just in terms of the amount of life that he has to block other creatures. So it's up to Slin now. How's he going to react? Both players having essentially almost the same stuff on the board. Critical with a Great Wolf advantage is going to attack next turn, but Slin with a second God Hand. So here everyone talking about Quake, don't forget about God Hand right there. Turn 14, 8 growth, you almost got to expect the God Hand every time. So that's Critical just being a step behind Slin. Is once again you could say, oh, Slin has the going first advantage, but I mean, if you start on turn 1 going first, that's one thing, but don't forget, there's been 2 board resets here. It's kind of just like a back and forth in a tennis rally or something. But Critical's got to start getting some stuff on the board, got to start trying to get to work somehow. He puts down a Brave and a Veteran, so this is going to take out most of Slin's units. So right away, notice that Critical worked on getting his card advantage up and held on to his cards until the right time. Slin has 5 cards and plenty of resources, but now he's going to have to play something instead of double God handing. So Critical surviving the double God hand very well. Almost wonder if Slin has a Quake, but at this point he just puts down another Brother of the Wolf and another Great Wolf. And it could be interesting to see what happens next, whether there's a rally or something else. And Critical could opt to play an Ancestral Totem here, but he elects to Pother and get another card. And let's see here, the Ancestral Totem or Druid Burial Ground, he actually plays it in the middle, which is an interesting play because normally you want to see these walls kind of on the front, but what I imagine Critical's doing here is making sure that every unit gets healed, especially the Veteran, especially the Great Wolf, which he definitely wants to protect. So he can play the Totem as well if he wants to, or he can save it for when more units are attacking. Because if he plays it right now, he's not going to get as huge bang for his buck, but he could play the Vetter as well. So there we go, there's the Totem. Could play it before, could play it after. This guy's going to die. If Slin has another Veteran, that could come out. But there's a Fertile Soil, as Slin is just electing to say, or not to say anything, but to just get back more cards and try again, as Critical's gone from being in a bad spot to buffing his units and getting back in the lead, and there's a Quake. So right there, Fertile Soil into Quake. That is a tough, tough combo to deal with, as Critical gets rid of the Vetter because it's just going to die, and he goes ahead and plays against the Great Wolf. You may say, well, what if Slin double Quakes here? Well, what if he does? At least he takes out his Great Wolf instead of the Great Wolf being down to just 1 health. So Slin with the Sister of the Foxes, we have all these Quakes, but if you want to know how to react to a Quake, this is the game to watch. Both of these players are playing very cautiously around the Quake, expecting it to happen instead of raging when it does happen. So Slin with 2 Sisters of the Wolf, just trying to get some cards back in the fold. As Critical has a rally, he could try and use it, but I mean, what he'd really get at this point is 2 Sisters of the Fox, and what he really wants to take out is the Great Wolf. So right now, he's just going to try and get as much as he can on the board. And that Sister of the Fox does bring a Mangy Wolf, which is nice. So it's up to Slin. He has 6 cards. He has 10 growth. Plenty to work with here, as he gets a second Great Wolf out. And on top of that, a Mangy Wolf. So the Mangy's not going to let both wolves attack, but it's going to buff him up. And there's the Dryadic Power as well. And Dryadic Power is not a card I see in every deck, but it is important, especially if you can play it in the middle of the field, because that means this guy is going to be doing 6 damage all the time. You may say, but why is he doing it against the idol that has nothing? Well, there's 2 reasons. One, it really forces Critical to go either one side or the other and protects one of his damage idols. And on top of that, we've already seen Transposition come out of Slin's cards, so just because it's Dryadic Power doesn't mean that he's totally stationary. So Critical with 2 Mangy Wolves, probably not the card he wants here. Although he could possibly play a rally here and try and take out some cards. And that's what he's going to do. He's getting out of the way of this guy because, well, what's he going to do? He's going to take out the Burial Ground. And not much else. So Critical asking, does he got Transposition too? Sort of the same question there. As there's an Ancestral Totem for Slin, you see a lot of similar strategies here. So 1 Tiny Wolf. And there's the Transposition play. As Slin gets out just so much stuff. This is where having 10 resources instead of just 8 is huge, as there is a board clear by Slin of Critical with just the Dryadic Power Transposition. Very tough combo. Critical going for a Fertile Soil of his Mangy Wolf. And that's really not too much of a play he has, except that he does get a lucky Pother there. The Pother could have sent this Great Wolf plenty of different places. He sends him back into the lane that has no health. So the Great Wolf, at least his damage is mitigated for now, but he's already done a lot of work. So there's actually Slin with the Pother right back. He tucked the Ragged Wolf down just to force the Great Wolf to go only to one direction. So there's a rally by Slin, and that's the GG. So both players working hard to reset the board all the time, but Slin able to get a card advantage early with 2 very quick fertile soils. And both players managing Quakes very well, but there you have it. Slin maintaining his grasp on the first ranking against a very formidable opponent in Critical. But, I mean, to a certain extent, yes, growth versus growth is about what cards you can get early. And Slin's deck was very fast, or Slin's draw was very fast compared to Critical's. But Critical was able to get some things on the board. He had Quakes that he could use, but once again, Quake is not a be-all, win-all, I win button, even against growth. And today, Slin showed you how you can play around Quake and still manage a victory here. So that's a great matchup between the number 1 and 2 ranked players in Scrolls, at least the time of this recording. So I hope you all enjoyed it. This is Way to Fail. If you have a replay you want me to see, feel free to message me or leave a comment. Or just comment in general about the matchup, what you think about it. Send any replays you might have to w2freplays@gmail.com. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you all next time.